welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of South Carolina.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for March the 26th, brought to you by Nana's Porch, the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area, and we will save our Nana's Porch news, notes, and highlights until after Lulu Kesin, who is joining us prior to her travels today to Birmingham. Welcome in, Lulu. I will say there is one noteworthy news item to report is Addison Victoria Alsep, National Elementary Honor Society. Congratulations to my pride and joy and my 12-year-old for making the National Honor Society. Lulu, good morning. How are you? Thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Great. All right. So Gamecocks made quick waste of Tennessee Tech to start the NCAA tournament. They looked like a number one seed. Then I really don't know what that was we saw in the first half on Sunday at Colonial Life Arena. Did Lisa Leslie intimidate everybody? Did they think she was suiting up for Indiana? Because the Gamecocks, I don't know if it was the fact that it's like a second senior day, but just an abysmal first half. I mean, the first quarter, they scored 9 points, lowest quarter all year, and shot 4 for 17 from the field.
Yeah, I feel like watching it, once Fagan missed her first 2 corner jumpers that she hit so consistently, I sort of was like, oof, this could be a long game. I definitely think fundamentally things were off. It was more than just poor shooting, but I also think a lot of bad misses, whether that was completely missing the hoop on layups or just simply missing shots that South Carolina normally makes. Definitely a harsh transition considering how well they shot against Tennessee Tech, and you're not going to shoot 64% from 3 and 67% from the field 2 games in a row. But when you have that big of a drop off, obviously it feels really drastic. So I looked to Michael Sauls next to me in DC, and I was just like, this feels nothing like the UConn game. Like I don't feel like there's an upset coming. It's just the fact that they're not making their key shots, so they got to go back to some simple basketball and clean things up on defense, because there's way too many just wide open layups Indiana was getting under the hoop that looked odd. But I'm not surprised at all that a Dawn Staley team came out of halftime a totally different group of 5, and I was really impressed of how the starters pulled things together and played honestly in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, the third quarter, really the difference. South Carolina outscores Indiana 26-14 to take an 11-point lead into the fourth quarter. That quarter was dead even, and South Carolina gets the win 64-53. I don't think Joyce Edwards cumulatively played as poorly. If you took her worst moments of 32 other games, I don't think she played as poorly as she played on Sunday. 2 of 8 from the field. I know they only charged her with 5 turnovers. I counted 6. More turnovers than points for one of the top 2 or 3 freshmen in all of college basketball. It looked like she never could get comfortable either. It just did not look like a comfortable day. So here's my next question for you is, do you think it's the fact that they were too hyped up because of the bulletin board material supplied by Sydney Parrish saying, oh, they're not as big as they were last year. We only lost by 2 points. We think basically she called them a dumb team, saying that they were smarter than South Carolina. And then at halftime, you go into the locker room and it kind of looked that way.
Yeah, I think that with South Carolina, they're so used to outrunning teams. They're so used to winning in transition. And I think early on, instead of doing that in the kind of productive way that they're so good at, they were just rushing everything. It just, it probably a bit of that bulletin board material, like you're saying, a lot of passion. I just think it was whatever was going on, the speed of the game wasn't necessarily channeled in the right way. And that's a lot of what Pau said afterwards. And like what Chloe said about Pau, like we just needed to calm down. It was probably a mix of emotions last game in CLA, but also, any March Madness game, I think for South Carolina, when you have the rich history of success in the tournament, every game has like a new narrative to it. And so I think that South Carolina is dealing with a lot of outside noise. And I'm not saying that they're listening to it in a way that's making them play bad. I just think that there's always going to be a lot of hype for this program going into each tournament game. And I just think, especially against Indiana, a lot of it was just too much, too fast at first. And with Joyce, it just kind of looked like Indiana figured her out, if that makes sense. Like I think Joyce's most mature quality is her ability to read defenses and her footwork. That's what Asia preached about her. Like she's not easy to figure out, but at the same time, like if you watch the way that I don't know the Indiana player off the top of my head, like stayed with her when she tried to do her little like up and under, get in the air move, like she didn't budge. And you credit Indiana for that, for the scout in the short period. But I definitely think it was, Joyce was getting doubled, but at the same time, those turnovers hurt more, in my opinion, than the lack of points, especially because, Chloe got it together in the second half. I turned to whoever and I was like, South Carolina has the last couple of games been their starters sort of set the tone, and then Lay and Tessa come off the bench and have been the ones kind of bursting with points. And when Lay and Tessa weren't hitting stuff, it was sort of like all the equilibrium, like everything was off. And so I was happily surprised, and I honestly feel more confident in South Carolina advancing further and further, seeing how the starters handled that. Like I've been very critical of the starting five's offense this year. So watching them get it together, gel, just be more mature, and also just getting everything kind of under control, but also doing it while scoring, I think was huge. Like Raven's threes, Bree's threes, Chloe, like everybody was connecting, not just Fagan, not just Pau. And that was good to see this late in the season.
Yeah, well, Raven hit a couple when they were up by 40 against Tennessee Tech, but none in the Indiana game. But Breezy Hall, she was my MVP, big shot, breezy. Breezy MF and Hall, hashtag 11 points, 4 of 6 from the field, lockdown defense, 3 of 4 from downtown. She just refused to let this team lose when she was on the floor. She did everything she could. Chloe Kitts, who got in early foul trouble, who I really thought was forcing things early and getting frustrated. She settled in. She had 10 points all in the second half, 11 rebounds, a double-double for her. And Sanaya Fagan finally got it going. 10 points, 5 for 10 from the field. And then Powell had 9 points. And so South Carolina moves on. And so before we move on, I have to move back because I was completely ignorant of this. I think the last time we had you on the show, you had to dust up with Kim Mulkey in the SEC tournament in Greenville at the media room. And so did that give you a better understanding of why I am such a notorious Kim Mulkey assaulter?
Well, the whole situation was very funny because I didn't necessarily take offense, and I still don't take offense to what she said and kind of how it happened. I just think that she's just unhinged. You know, that's my impression of Kim Mulkey. Obviously, I have a likely chance at some point. You know, South Carolina's obviously going to play them next year. They could face them in the tournament this year. My run-ins with Kim Mulkey are probably far from over. I get nervous around any coach that is unpredictable, like good or bad. Just I'm the type of journalist that feels a lot more relaxed when like you have somebody that you know is gonna kind of say something. Like with a Shane Beamer, he loves to chat, he loves to talk, he loves to give answers, and I appreciate the kind of just the calm vibe sometimes. So going forward, I'm just, I guess, more hyper aware that even if I'm sitting far away, Kim still might find something unhinged to say. It was definitely a funny moment to me. I looked around and I thought other people were eating, but it was so late in the night and I had finished, like most of my South Carolina coworkers were gone because I was working the other games for USA Today. So it was late. I was kind of like delusional at that point anyways. And so that interaction definitely woke me up, but she's certainly an acquired taste. And I see why some people react certain ways to what she says. If she had said something to offend me, I'm sure I would have had a different reaction, but I took it as a joke and I'm very impressed with her eyesight. I don't know how she saw from that far away, but I do understand some people have felt the comment was unnecessary and have been very kind to me, sort of asking me if I'm okay about it and stuff like that, which again, it was a funny moment, but definitely did not expect that at all.
Well, you're a better person than me because if she had said that to me, I would have said, I'm hungry. Why don't you learn how to dress?
See, I think that, yeah, I can't say that, you know. The credential that I'm wearing, I'm trying to be as quiet as possible when I'm in those media rooms, even when I'm eating.
I get it. All right. So so the Sweet 16 is set, but it's a bittersweet 16 because of what happened Monday night late. Juju Watkins. I mean, you knew it immediately. Number one, I was backing you up on social media. It was not a dirty play. Somebody was trying to compare it to NBA players and how offended we'd be well, look, college young ladies in the NCAA tournament, especially Mississippi State, who was really lucky to be there, I thought, and not that good. That's not the same as Domantas Sabonis stepping under Jason Tatum's landing space on a three-point shot. It's just not the same. Thankfully, Tatum didn't break his ankle. But Juju Watkins is out for the tournament really before it goes on the national stage, although all the games were on. They were on the late game on the East Coast. But I will say this. Do not throw dirt on Southern Cal because they have a very talented roster. And a lot of times her usage is down from last year. Like she averaged 27 shots a game as a freshman. This year, a little over 18 shots per game. But we saw Kiki Iriothan go off. You got Rhea Marshall, who's got another post player who's 1,000 rebounds, 1,000 points, and can spread the floor. And you got Kennedy Smith, who I thought, other than Joyce Edwards, was the best player in any All-Star game last year. She starts. Kaylee Heckel, and you got Talia Van Olahoffen, who transferred from Oregon State, who's a 6'1" guard that was over a 40% three-point shooter last year at Oregon State. I mean, this is still a very dangerous team to me because they're probably going to play UConn. Okay, Oklahoma, congrats. You blew out Iowa, which I said. Okay, I've got two statements I'm sticking with that I've said. One, Iowa basketball will beat Indiana State without Larry Bird. Okay, Caitlin Clark is not walking through that door, to quote Rick Pitino. And Ohio State, one and done, the most overrated program on an annual basis in women's college basketball. Tennessee boat raced them on their home floor. Okay. But so it's probably going to be UConn and Southern Cal in a rematch, and UConn does not have the size nor the athleticism to match up with Southern Cal inside. And so it's going to be, can Southern Cal on the perimeter bother UConn enough to run them off the three-point line? I think that will be a very intriguing matchup.
Yeah, and I appreciate you, one, agreeing with me. Obviously, it's so hard. So many, I think a lot of people, this is a whole other issue, people tweeting and addressing things on social media without thinking, but so much goes into it when you claim that a play was intentional or dirty or things like that. And so I'm trying my best to kind of advocate in the fact that Mississippi State, obviously South Carolina plays them every year. I watch them play in the SEC tournament. I think Sam Purcell's statement was really, really well said afterwards, mixing in kind of standing up for his program. We're a program of class. We play to compete, but also none of us are happy about, we all love Juju. She makes our game better. And I think just overall, a lot of people forget two things can exist at once. You can feel bad for Juju and also acknowledge it wasn't a dirty play. That's honestly, in my opinion, one of the worst parts about ACLs. They're so common in women. I've seen friends, I've seen players I've covered go down with ACL tears, and it can happen so easily, unfortunately. And so it does change everything in terms of it's devastating and it's horrible. And I love watching Juju play, and she does make women's college basketball better. But I agree wholeheartedly or entirely about this Southern Cal team is still loaded. They're still talented. I don't think they're going away just because Juju's down. And I think that speaks to who Juju is. She elevates those around her. It's so great that she's able to succeed on the level she does, still with a really great team behind her. So I'm excited to see, I do think that Oklahoma just won't be able to hang with Southern Cal. And so I do think it'll be a UConn USC matchup, but I'm curious. It could go either way. Obviously, Sarah Strong's talented, but Kiki has experience. She's, she did a lot at Stanford. She did a lot on her, she had Cameron Brink, but she had games where she had to kind of carry. So her leadership.
John Staley wanted her.
Exactly. Her leadership was huge in that game. So very the region that South Carolina is not in, there's a lot to look at, and it'll be a lot of good basketball to watch.
Yeah, so Southern Cal next will get Kansas State, who got Okoye Lee back. They beat Kentucky.
Oh, right, yeah.
Washington. And Kenny Brooks teams, Virginia Tech and Kentucky, softer than a roll of Charmin. They just are every year, okay? When I was watching Virginia Tech blow a double-digit lead against Kim Mulkey and LSU sitting right behind her bench 2 years ago in the Final Four in Dallas, and there was under 2 minutes to go, and they were going to lose the game. Virginia Tech players were walking up the court for LSU to shoot free throws, laughing. Okay, I don't know what it is about him. Soft. So those are my three. I got it right. Kentucky, softer than a roll of Charmin. Iowa, Indiana State without Larry Bird, and Ohio State, the most overrated program in the country on an annual basis. All right, so South Carolina, they're going to get Maryland. Maryland, Alabama was the best game of the tournament. Sarah Ashley Barker, girl, you go, 45 points. She hit 3 free throws in a row with less than a second to go to send that game in overtime. But Alabama blew a 17-point second half lead in that game. They got their best player back from a knee injury. She's wearing a huge brace. Maryland and South Carolina, no strangers to each other. And then it's going to be Tobacco Road on the other side. Duke and North Carolina meeting for the 13th time this season. I think Kara Lawson is tougher than a $2 steak, and that's how her teams play. North Carolina is not. I expect South Carolina and Duke to battle in that region, and it'll be a rematch of a game earlier this season, but it won't be in Colonial Life Arena. It'll be in Birmingham. I think that's a danger game for South Carolina.
Yeah, and I agree. The Celtics fan in me obviously is a huge Coach Lawson fan. I'm really happy to see all her success at Duke. I do think it'll be a rematch, and I'm curious because it was such a weird game. It was December 5th, so it was very early on in the season. It was a 9 p.m. tip, and South Carolina came out on this huge run and was up by so much, and then Duke sort of got it together late and cut the lead, and South Carolina pulled off at one point. For a while, it was their closest win of the season, I think, up until LSU maybe. Yeah. And so I just think this Duke team is so different than it was in December. And not to say South Carolina isn't going to watch extensive film. I know Dawn Staley isn't going to walk into prep if that's her opponent and be like, okay, we played these guys, we're good. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I do think it'll be just an overall a more consistent four-quarter battle. It was very up and down last time, and Kara was funny in the post game. She was like, "Yeah, if you wanted to know, our plan wasn't to leave their best free throw or 3-point shooters open. I just think kind of similar to maybe Indiana, a lot just went wrong from the jump for them. Their scout, I guess, kind of whether they executed it right or not, clearly something was off." And they pulled it together late, and it was just too late. But I am curious to see how if it goes that way, how the second game will go.
I mean, obviously, South Carolina's got to beat Maryland first. Ed in the chat says Fagan will eat cubic for lunch. He likes Raven shutting down Tabasu. But the Breezy Hall, Cheyenne Sellers matchup should be fun. She's really good. I think Breezy's got to not go for the fakes because Sellers has that huge knee brace. She's not going to be able to elevate as much. I think that is the big key there, her avoiding foul trouble and then taking it to her because I think she has the quickness advantage.
Yeah, and Maryland's number 2 in the country in foul shooting. They're the second best foul shooting team, and I think that's going to be a huge factor. South Carolina not just giving them free trips to the foul line. I made a dumb joke in the group chat about when I saw Sellers in her goggles, because I was like, do all Sellers who play sports wear rec specs? But I like a lot of how Maryland plays just from a basketball fan standpoint. Obviously, the Alabama game was really fun to watch, but just kind of looking at statistically and not having watched more than a couple of their games, it does seem like most of their top 5 leading scorers are all guards. A lot of their action comes from outside of the paint, just in terms of, scoring and production. So it'll kind of depend on Chloe and Fagan on both ends, because that's, if it means helping out on defense and leaving a slower post player to help a quick guard drive, it's one thing, but also how productive they are in demanding the ball inside as well.
All right, so quickly, I know we got a hard out here, about 4 minutes to go. So Texas in a rematch with Tennessee, I think they win. Then TCU, Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, the cream rises to the top. I did think it was good to see Haley Van Lith. I think that's 2 years in a row, or maybe 3 years in a row. No, 2 years in a row. I think when she was at LSU, they eliminated Louisville, and now TCU, they eliminated Louisville. Louisville women's basketball, I think they are irrelevant nationally now. Texas and Notre Dame in a rematch. Texas just has such a hard time scoring. Notre Dame can spread them and take advantage. I could see Notre Dame with the upset here.
Yeah, I will admit some of my picks have been wrong. And so, I thought that Notre Dame would struggle a little bit mentally in the tournament. So, I was impressed with the Michigan team before the tournament started. So I was like, I could totally see Silas Swords just destroying Notre Dame's defense and getting in their heads and beating them. Obviously, Notre Dame took really great care of Michigan. But if I had to put money on a Notre Dame-Texas game, I would put Notre Dame. I do just think that Texas doesn't have the offensive production. And maybe I'm biased, but so far I felt in the first 2 rounds that South Carolina played the best of the 1 seeds. It just felt like even in that Indiana game, Texas, they're so hard to figure out in a way, because it's really easy to write them off because of the lack of offensive production. But at the same time, they have pulled off these really impressive wins. So it's hard. I wouldn't count out Tennessee just based on the fact that they score so much. They could simply just score more than Texas can. But at the same time, Tennessee is also a huge mystery. They lost to Georgia. So it's so hard, but I think if Texas does beat Tennessee, it's definitely going to be close.
Yeah, I'm picking Notre Dame, though, in that final. And so then UCLA plays Ole Miss. Ole Miss, I love the way they play defense. They are tenacious, but I just think they can't score enough. But LSU, I believe, will send Wes Moore and his really bad toupee home. And LSU, maybe it's the homer in me, but it's so hard for me to pull for Kim Mulkey. But LSU is tougher than a $2 steak. They have athletes that are tenacious, and that is a coaching mismatch. Corey Close versus Kim Mulkey. Can UCLA survive LSU and make it to the Final Four?
I don't think so.
Me neither.
I don't think UCLA is going to the Final Four. That's my hot take, or maybe cold take, because I think a lot of people agree with me. But yeah, I agree with you there. I think Ole Miss can give certainly in a perfect world, they can upset LSU simply because of the defense and the way they play. You brought up a great point. It's how they got to score to do it. But I definitely would pick Kim Mulkey's scout, her team's intensity, her team's IQ. I mean, they know how to pull ahead at the right times. I do think that they can give UCLA some trouble and win.
All right, great stuff. So before I let you go, this is the most important question for us as Celtics fans. Are you watching Celtic City on HBO Max? Oh,
I am. God. Yes.
Oh, it gives me chills every episode. Your old boss, Bill Simmons, his dad sitting on the couch. The picture of Bill Simmons at 4 years old, able to be on the court right next to John Havlicek who was the MVP of the league. Now, that was before you were born, and I was young, but I remember those teams. I barely remember Bill Russell, but that was my dad's sports hero. Mine was Hank Aaron growing up. But Celtic City on HBO Max, that's why Bill Simmons, he is the man when it comes in conjunction with HBO Sports. It's been tremendous, and it's only halfway over, and they're just getting to probably the Bird Dr. J fight will be in the next episode.
Yeah.
So, again, before you were born, I vividly remember all of those matchups.
Yeah, I love it. It's very well done, and I too get very chills, the very cheesy, I love being a journalist feeling, all that, love being from I watched the first episode and I was like, I want to move back home, just looking at it. But no, it's great. And I forgot to say before, congrats to your family on the award and everything. And thanks for having me. And I'll check in once, hopefully South Carolina's going to Tampa and I get to extend my travels.
Yeah, and you'll get to go in a warm city where it'll rain every day between 2 and 4 p.m. So
yes.
Safe travels. Thanks for being with us, Lulu. I can't thank you enough. You do a fantastic job. All the best to you. I can't wait to read your coverage and everything you put out on social media. Be well, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Have a good rest of your week.
Thanks. All right, that was the incomparable Lulu Kesin. All right, a few Gamecock news, notes, and headlines brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area, Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue. Nana's Porch has got you covered. It's wedding season, wedding anniversary season, quinceañera, bar mitzvahs, all kinds of celebrations going on. If you need your event catered, go to nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Tell him I sent you. And even if you don't have a big catering event coming up, go to Nana's Porch and order plenty of Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. You order it today, it'll be here. It'll be there in time, particularly if you're in the Carolinas, for you to watch to have a snack or pimento cheese sandwich while you're watching all the March Madness this weekend. The men will go to the Final Four, and the women, I guess by Monday, will go to the Final Four. So Ed asked if South Carolina has any interest in Kentucky freshman 6'7" Clara Silva, who is from Portugal. I don't know. She put a do not contact on there. Dawn Staley, I think, will be active in the portal with everybody that they're losing. I do think they would like to add the right player, but she can afford to be very choosy. And let's face it, there'll be a ton of players that want to come to South Carolina. All right, so few notes and headlines before Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central joins us. Yesterday, South Carolina's softball team got their first shutout over Clemson in program history. South Carolina's been playing softball for 52 years. I think Clemson's only been playing for like less than 10. But the Gamecocks beat Clemson 6-0. They're the number 10 team in the country. They are 25-6, and they shut out Clemson to get a win in the Palmetto Series. Ariana Roddy hit her 11th home run of the season. Neely Lamb, 5 shutout innings, allow it with 4 strikeouts and just 2 hits and no base on balls. Sam Gress came in and closed it out with a pair of shutout innings. Quince Lilio, the transfer from Oklahoma, went 3 for 4, setting the scene for Roddy's home run in the first inning. She also led the team with 2 runs scored. This weekend, back to life in the SEC. South Carolina, number 10, travels to play number 3, LSU, beginning Friday at 6 p.m. Gamecock Baseball battled North Carolina. It was 8-8. North Carolina scored 5 runs in the 8th inning to win 13-8. Winston Gandy has been named the new head coach at Grand Canyon State, joining the Clapper, who was formerly at Vanderbilt. Gamecock men played Grand Canyon State last year. They're really good. It's in Phoenix. Gandy is a rising star. And, I think if it was just up to Dawn Staley, Lisa Leslie would be her pick for the next assistant coach at South Carolina. We'll see if that happens or not. Dawn Staley, early either this morning or yesterday morning on the set at WIS, mentioned it. Judy Gatson, who took that picture of me and Dawn Staley at the hotel after South Carolina won their first national championship. They asked her about it. I think Lisa Leslie has to decide if she wants to become a full-time coach. If she doesn't want to, there will be no shortage of A-plus list resumes for that job. I think Dawn Staley would really like to bring on a bigs coach. Although I got to give Lisa Boyer a lot of credit. She moved over to fill that role and did a great job this year with Chloe Kitts, Fagan, and with Joyce Edwards. And Adele Tack, who I'm telling you is going to be a player. And like I said, Addison National Elementary Honor Society. I'm a very proud dad. I don't have time to tell you the story, but Addison was in the 1st grade when the pandemic broke out. They finished 1st grade on a laptop. All of 2nd grade was on a laptop. 3rd grade public school had no plan. A lot of those kids were lost. We made the decision, she's not going to be lost. She's not going to fall behind. We pulled her out. We put her in one of the top private schools in the area. I'm not ashamed to say she repeated the 3rd grade because she needed to. She's also worked very hard with Kumon for 2+ years to get ahead and catch up. And that's why in the 3 years she's been at Brentwood Christian, she's had over a 95 cumulative average and is in the Elementary National Honor Society. And I could not be more proud because my girl is special. She's smart. She's funny. She's athletic. She's got a strong personality. And she's just awesome. She makes friends easily. She's a natural leader. And she's so smart. And so I'm not going to be like Forrest Gump and get choked up talking about little Forrest, but that's how proud I am of her. All right, Jack Veltri is popping in right now. Perfect timing. Always great to have the pride of Fort Mill, even though he's from a mixed family of Clemson. I don't understand that. I'm from a mixed family, or a part of a mixed family, but that's completely different. Nobody from my family, well, all my Allseps, except for me and my Uncle Doug, they all love Clemson because they all live in Seneca. But Jack, welcome in, the hardest working man at Gamecock Central, covering football, basketball, baseball. But hey, how about that women's softball team shutting out Clemson first time in program history, even though South Carolina's been playing softball for 52 years and Clemson's been playing softball for less than 10.
Big win last night, right, Keith? It's always good to see South Carolina beating Clemson in any sport, honestly. In softball this year, I mean, I think I read somewhere that was the first time in like 54 games that Clemson's been shut out. So not bad, honestly, and a very good performance last night. It seemed like a pretty easy, comfortable win after they jumped out quickly to a 4-0 lead and then smooth sailing from there. So hats off to Ashley Chastain and company for another huge win and moving forward with a great season.
She's got a lot of girls from South Carolina on that team that she brought with her from Charlotte and from other places that wanted to come to South Carolina, and that's why Joyce Compton is no longer the coach. And I think it just meant more because you have so many South Carolina natives on that roster that have had success at Charlotte. Now they're the number 10 team in the country. I mean, they went toe-to-toe with Oklahoma, who's won like 4 straight national championships. They lost 3 heartbreakers all by 1 run. And now, you know, they go to number 3 LSU this weekend. But hats off to Ashley Chastain, who I think is the early choice for SEC softball coach of the year and maybe national coach of the year if she keeps South Carolina in the top 10 by the end of SEC play, which will be a tall order because I think there's like 8 SEC teams in the top 10.
Yeah, look, the schedule is going to be really difficult moving forward. You got the big series win over Texas Tech. You bounced back with a series win over Georgia after that Oklahoma series. You looked very good all season, I think, and beating Clemson last night is a big win in this state, especially for this fan base, as we all know. But, yeah, no, I think there's something to be said about what the job she's done. And, you know, I did wonder what it was going to do to bring in transfers from, you know, an American school like Charlotte, right? It's you know, not the SEC, but that's a good team that she had over there with the 49ers for a few years. I mean, they won the conference championship last year. She brought in the right group of players from that team to make it work. And she also did a good job recruiting in the short time that she had over the summer. So hats off to her. She's done a great job. I think she is got to be the early front runner for SEC Coach of the Year, potentially National Coach of the Year. Because, man, as you know, South Carolina has not been good at softball for the last few years. Like, yes, they've made the postseason a few times under Bev Smith, but you got to remember there were a few really dark seasons in there to kick off the 2020s where it was last place finishes in this conference. I think maybe like 2 or 3 straight years where you just were in the cellar and you could not win more than a few games in conference play. But now you're starting to change the dynamic. And if you do continue to win like you have been, you're not only going to definitely win Coach of the Year, but you're also going to get into the postseason and potentially host a regional, which would be really cool for this program in year 1. I think that's a massive success. And hats off to her. The players are doing great, and it's just a perfect recipe for success right now.
Hey, and how about Neely Lamb, who South Carolina didn't think was good enough? She went to Charleston Southern, where she was the Big South Player of the Year as a freshman, and she pitches 5 shutout innings, 4 strikeouts, 2 hits, and no walks, and gets the win in that Clemson game. I mean, she was juiced for that game, being a South Carolina native. All right, so let's get to Gamecock football. They're through 3 days of spring practice. Several coaches have met with the media. I'm sure you were there. I don't know because of your baseball coverage, but I was very disappointed we didn't have a live YouTube feed of Mike Shula and Clayton White. I don't know if they had gremlins or if the thinker just decided not to do it live. But give me your key takeaways from Mike Shula and his thoughts early on the offense.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to be there just because I was traveling back from Arkansas with baseball the weekend. But reading up a little bit and listening to what has been said with Shula and whatnot, one thing that does stand out is he was asked a lot about Tree Babalade. And Tree is interesting because he obviously got thrown into the mix as a freshman with some injuries starting. I think it was that Georgia game he started to begin his college career, and then he was a starter the rest of the year as a freshman. And then last year, a little bit more of a backseat, I'd say he took with Josiah Thompson coming into the picture and played a little bit. But now it's like, all right, he's in year 3. This has got to be where he takes like that next step forward. And Shula, talked a lot of good about him, and I'm very interested to see how he progresses throughout the spring. But also another guy like Trovon Ball is another interesting name that very similar to Tree in the fact that they both started on the offensive line as freshmen, and then last year they were kind of on the back burner while some other guys came into the mix. So, but I really did like what Shula had to say about him, just being a guy that can take advantage of an opportunity potentially, and we'll see. But it's either he'll be a tackle or maybe move to another position on the offensive line. So, but very like you said, like Shula said, very talented, smart. He's got a fast mind. So I'm excited to see what Tree does.
So I think Tree is going to be the starting left guard and probably the backup left tackle. Like if something happened to Josiah Thompson, he's probably moving out there. I also thought it was interesting. Mike Shula said the only other person that touches the football on every play besides the quarterback is the center. We got to peek into who the backup center or the center battle between Boaz Stanley and R.J. Newsome, it looks like, is at center. We didn't know where he was going to be. I thought Nick Sharp might get a look there. We know, right, Kason Henry's probably going to be the starting right tackle, although I do think Jatavius Shivers is more athletic than him. That could be a battle. So really, right guard, if Boaz Stanley is the center, and I think he's the heavy favorite for that position, right guard's really the one position, and you mentioned Trovon Ball. It's probably going to be Trovon Ball or Nick Sharp.
I would say so. I also wonder, another guy that also gets lost in the shuffle, mainly because he's been injured before, and last year's his first year back, Marquis Anderson. Like, what's going on with him? And I think it's a situation where, look, I think you want to get into a situation like you had last year where you find your best 5 on the offensive line and then you stick with it regardless of what happens. Because as we saw last year, this group on the offensive line was relatively the same all year. They started out a little sluggish at the beginning of the year, gave up a lot of sacks, but kind of as they got into the middle of the season, kind of when South Carolina took off in general, the offensive line play was a lot better and more consistent. And that's excellent to know when you have a quarterback like Lenore Sellers who can run around. He scrambles out of the pocket, makes dynamic things happen with his feet. And you need a good offensive line to protect you. Now, you're losing 3 starters on the interior. You're losing your center. You're losing your 2 guards. I think you are right. I think right guard's probably the one spot that I would say is probably going to be like, I mean, every spot in the line I think is open competition, obviously, like center, obviously with Newsome and Boaz Stanley. That's a competition right there. Right tackle. I don't think it's as much of a shoo-in that Kason Henry is your starting right tackle, just because I think they like Jatavius Shivers and what he can bring to the table. And we saw him play a little bit last year, and Kason struggled, for a decent portion of last season. So I do think, though, there are a lot of battles going on this line. I think left tackle is pretty much solidified with Josiah Thompson back. And then I think, like you said, left guard, I think Tree is probably moving there. I think he's got to start this year. And then, right guard, we'll see what happens. But I would like to see Trovon Ball get back in there and, have another go at it. Because I think he had a really nice freshman year. And he's someone that maybe him and Tree really benefit from. I don't know if sitting on the bench a little bit last year was good for them because they played as freshmen. But having the experience that they have and getting to learn a little bit and go through spring practice now where you're not going every single day, like you have the time off to watch film and whatnot, I think that's probably good for them.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be intriguing. All right, so yesterday, Marquell Blackwell finally showed up for media availability. And he no-showed last year because he was trying to get that Ohio State running backs job. But Mike Furry, I thought, had the interview of the day. Were you able to be there?
No. So I've been so busy with baseball lately that I flew back from Arkansas on Monday during the press conferences, and then Tuesday I just decided to stay in Fort Mill and make the drive up to Charlotte for the game last night with baseball. But yeah, I really haven't been able to see a ton of football. I'll be there at press conferences today and whatnot. But I heard Furry had a lot of good things to say, and he's a good dude to just listen to and hear his perspective on the game because he's so energetic. I think he spoke for 16 minutes yesterday or something. The guy knows what he's talking about. And he's doing a heck of a job with this receiver room, in my opinion. Recruiting wise, doing an excellent job, keeping a lot of in-state talent here and also going out of state to find good talent. But also, I thought it was interesting that, South Carolina didn't get a transfer wide receiver out of the portal. And, I think you can think of that they got a lot of freshmen coming in, right? They have 6 or 7 freshmen joining the team, if I'm not mistaken. Then you also have Nick Harbor, Jared Brown, a lot of different players that Amazio Bennett that you think are going to take the next step. And if you need to, I think after the spring, that's when you can go out here and get another receiver. But, I think one thing that he said that was very interesting to me, and I'm paraphrasing here, there were a lot of boxes that were really just outside of talent. Obviously, you want to find the most talented guys, but if they don't fit what you're trying to build, is it really worth it then? Do you want a receiver coming in here that maybe, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, maybe, is kind of like a ball hawk. They kind of demand a certain amount of receptions. And I don't think that's really what South Carolina is about, right? Because, if that were the case, I think we would be seeing one of these receivers, become the top dog and be a clear number one. But we just haven't seen that yet. And I think you spread the ball around a little bit more. So maybe, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud there. But I did like a lot of what Furry had to say yesterday.
So how big is it for Nick Harbor to give up track, go through winter workouts, and now in spring practice? I mean, I thought he had some interesting words about him and how certainly we all saw the progression of Nick Harbor last year, whether it was the Alabama game, the huge catch, whether it was at Vanderbilt when he took the ball on the sideline and instead of stepping out of bounds, he just bowled over 2 guys on the sideline, or whether it's the Missouri game beating the corner blitz and then drawing a big DPI and having another deep ball in that game, or the Clemson game where he makes big catches, throughout the season. And at the Oklahoma game, he had a very impressive couple of catches there. How big is it for him now to finally, just for the first time in his life, focus on football?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, you got to think about it, Keith. Last year, he hasn't gone through spring practice until this year. So last year at this time, he's doing track, he's doing his thing, doing great, out there. But then he comes to football and he's, watching on the sideline and stuff, and he's still getting in his work when he can, catching passes at the jug machine and whatnot. But, like he spoke to the media last week. I thought it was interesting. He's like, I really don't get back into football like full time until July or August. And, as we all know, that's about the time that fall camp gets going. And it's a lot to, I don't want to say learn on the fly, because he's been around for a little bit at this point. But it's like, he's at some point you kind of got to figure out, okay, track I think is always going to be there because he's naturally just super fast. And I don't think taking a year off is a bad idea. I actually think it's a good thing for him. He's now allowed to just focus himself on one thing and see what he can do with his football talent. Because like you said, Keith, the things he was doing towards the end of last season after that Alabama game, I thought he was one of South Carolina's better receivers that they had, and took some really big steps forward, like a guy that, hey, get me the ball and I'll make some plays. That's what we saw. Like, I always think back to the over-the-shoulder catch he made against Missouri for a touchdown early in that first half. And that was one of his standout plays. He made some nice big catches against Vanderbilt, Clemson, even Illinois. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from him. And with what Furry said about him, because he was asked about Nick yesterday, this was very interesting. The best thing that could ever happen to Nick is that these 6 freshman receivers are coming in. And because they're coming in here right now and they're doing everything they can to get on the field as fast as possible, that's only going to push Nick. And Nick has said that he's wanting to help the young guys get acclimated to the speed of college football and stuff. But it is true. Like, South Carolina doesn't have a number one receiver right now, I don't think. And I think Nick can be that guy, given the fact that he's now focusing on football full time for this year. And the talent is off the charts, as we all know. He's more than a guy that is just going to run straight go routes and catch a 50-yard bomb. That's just not always going to happen. It happened a little bit last year, but this is a guy that would make nice cuts and slants, patterns over the middle. He's a guy that, with his speed and athleticism and his hands progressively getting better, I really do think the sky is still the limit for him. I think he is due for a big year here to build off of what he did last year. And maybe if things work out well enough for him, we're talking about potential NFL draft pick after his junior year. But I think this is a big time for him to get out here, learn, understand what he needs to do to take that next step.
I agree. So one of the eye-opening things Mike Furry said about the freshman, Brian Rowe, vertical leap, 41.5 inches. Okay, but then Lex Cyrus came in and broke the program record for the vertical leap, which we know Nick Emanwari vertical like 43 at the NFL Combine. He probably did it at South Carolina. And so Brian Rowe, we heard a lot of rumblings. He was the most impressive during bowl practice of the freshman wide receivers. I think we all know Malik Clark is going to figure in there somewhere, right? The big get, 6'2", almost 6'3", almost 190, 10, 500 meters at that size. Lex Cyrus, the number one receiver in Pennsylvania, a sub 10, 400 meters guy, and a guy that verticals more than 41.5 inches, which Actually, that shocked the hell out of me when he said that. But he said it. And then, let's not forget about Jaden Sellers, who missed his junior year with an injury, bounced back big. He's also kind of got a special connection with that number 16 guy I think he plays quarterback. Yeah. And then you got Jordan Gidron, who physically and from a maturity standpoint, at 17 years old, this guy reclassifies, graduates early, and is in for winter workouts and spring practice. That's unbelievable to me. That's mind-boggling to me, and he's in the mix. Like, he is good enough to be an SEC wide receiver at 17 years old. How mind-boggling is that?
Very much so. And I think you bring up a good point here, Keith, that I think you're alluding to. I really don't know if you need to – we'll see how spring ultimately does shake out before the portal opens. I don't really know if you maybe you go out and get one guy in the portal. But I don't think you really need to go out and dyingly look for a receiver in the portal, especially if no one that noteworthy is out there. Because we saw South Carolina do it last year where they went out, and don't forget about Dre Jacobs too, who's still in the mix. That's another guy that I thought showed some flashes last year that can do more this year. And then you got Dale Von Campbell too, that obviously he's not here anymore, but that's another guy you picked up in the portal in the spring cycle. So I don't really know if you need to go out and get someone like that. I think there's a reason why South Carolina didn't in the winter cycle, because as you just mentioned, they have all these really promising young receivers. And that's what I think this is going to be about. We saw Mazeo Bennett last year become a guy in that receiver room right out of the gate. From Kentucky on, in my opinion, when he had that touchdown catch, he had some really nice moments. I think he's going to take a bigger step forward this year. But I think that is paving the way to see what some of these freshmen can do. You didn't sign all these freshman receivers to not play them. You're playing them. Maybe not all of them, but more likely than not, you're playing most of them. And don't forget, you got a guy like Donovan Murph. That's another guy that is going to be joining the team relatively soon in the summer. That's another guy that is going to be in the mix as well, I would imagine. So I just think the point is, I think you have a lot of nice, potentially good young options at receiver, while also having your Nick Harbors, Dre Jacobs, Mazeo Bennett, Jared Brown. You have some vets in that room that I think can carry the load at the beginning of the year as these freshmen come along, and then we kind of start to see the seedlings kind of be planted for what the future looks like, after this season.
Yeah, Mike Furry, very complimentary of Mazeo Bennett. He said nobody's made as big a jump as Mazeo Bennett. He's quicker, faster. He's embraced the weight room. That's what you expect from a guy that loves football like he does. And he is very complimentary of Jared Brown, that he's becoming a more complete player. He's not just a gadget player, whether he's a speed sweep, jet sweep, or a screen guy. And then, like you said, Vandrevis Jacobs, he did not have an opportunity to go through spring practice. We knew coming in the maturity issues, the lack of consistency, that was the one knock. He's made a big jump. So along with Harbor, that gives you 4 veteran guys along with all these newcomers. And you know what? Who's to say Donovan Murph may not be the most talented guy of all of them? We'll find out once the season gets underway. I still think in the short term, it may be Malik Clark and Brian Rowe, but in the long term, Donovan Murph, he's got the bloodlines, Alshon Jeffrey, Cousin, and so I think they're set. Like, if I'm South Carolina, I'm not entertaining a wide receiver unless it's just a guy that is like a George Pickens type of guy that's begging to come to South Carolina.
Too good to pass up, I think, is kind of what that would look like. And again, who knows how many guys are going to end up leaving and going into the portal anyway from other schools and stuff. And I think South Carolina's they know what they're doing here. They're setting up for the long term here, having a future of so many talented receivers. And it's like you don't bring them in not to play them. Like we saw this last year with Mazio. Like I said, you played him right away, and he was a factor for most of the year. So I am looking forward to seeing what some of these young guys can do. And again, I think you can really pick from any of them and not be surprised that they step up and make some big plays this year. But from as it goes for day one on who's starting in that season opener out in Atlanta, I do think it's going to be the older guys, obviously. But which one of these young receivers, if they had to go with one, who is that guy that kind of makes that immediate impact? That's something that I really think you could just go any direction on.
I agree. Completely agree. All right. So for me, when that transfer portal opens, I think it's April 16th through the 25th. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah. Let me take a look real quick.
It's defensive tackle and place kicker. Okay. And it really needs to be place kicker, field goal kicker, and then defensive tackle in that order. That's my opinion on that.
Yeah, and you're right about the dates, by the way, April 16th through the 25th. And that is not a long time for the portal to be open, but I think it's enough time to go out there and get what you need. I do agree. I think defensive line, especially at tackle, you would like to go out and get someone else, I think, additionally. You can never have, as we learned last year, you can never have too much depth on that defensive line. Like South Carolina lost so much just across the board. I mean, on that defensive line, Tonka's gone. Boogie's gone. TJ Sanders is gone. DeAndre Jules, I know he was hurt last year for a little bit, but he's gone. Like, you lost so much talent that the main guys you brought back are Nick Barrett and Monkel Goodwine. And then you added some guys like you brought in a few transfers and stuff. You have a few freshmen coming in, Xavion Hardy from the JUCO ranks. I think they have good talent right now, but it does not hurt to go out there. And if a veteran's out there, and you have Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy too. So you have him as well, but you can never have too much. Like I said, I think if you find the right guy out there in the portal, why not bring him in? See what happens. And then as for place kicker, I agree. I do think it wouldn't be the worst idea to go out there and find someone. Like, I think Mason Love is probably going to be your punter. I would imagine. I feel like he's probably the front runner at that spot. He'll probably be your holder too, just like Kai Kroger was. But yeah, like kicker, I mean, we saw how impactful it was last year for South Carolina. Like, you can argue there were like at least 3 games last season where kicking was a huge deal. Like the Alabama game, the LSU game, and then I'll even say the Citrus Bowl was pretty impactful. Like Alex Herrera, I think, did okay last year, but man, it was a massive departure from Parker White and Mitch Jeter, guys like that. I mean, you have Max Kelly coming in this summer. Is he a guy, or he's already with the program? I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Kyler Farrow. But is Max Kelly going to be?
Kelly is not in.
Oh, so okay. I knew it was one or the other, but
yeah.
But when Kelly comes in the summer, does he end up taking the job, or does South Carolina go out and try to find a kicker in the portal, or are they content with a guy like Peyton Argent, or William Joyce also is a guy that's back? But I don't know. Kicking was so crucial last year. Like, it may not seem like it matters all too much. Like, Herrera hit all his extra points and stuff, but I think he went like 15 of 21 on his field goals, and there were some tough misses in there that, like, if you make some of these kicks, we're probably talking about South Carolina going to the playoff. Like, let's be honest, man. So I think you definitely want to go out there and search for what you would like to find, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think you need to see if things aren't going super, super well in spring practice, you better go out there and probably find someone in the portal.
Look, unless you're dumb enough like Taylor Edwards was to text on his own phone, there's no such thing as tampering. Okay, rule number one, obey all rules. There are no rules in the NCAA right now. I mean, South Carolina should have been and should be currently tampering with every available kicker, whether that's Power 5, Group of 5, and putting an offer out there to get them when this portal opens up. Because even Shane Beamer said it in his interview with Josh Pate, my guy, Mr. College Football, Mr. SEC. We used to have him on the pod on the way up before he got too big to be able to come on with us. But the margin of victory, or to win or lose a game, is so razor thin in the SEC that a missed kick, a couple of missed kicks, is the difference between going to the Citrus Bowl or playing the SEC championship game and going to the college football playoff. That is the bottom line.
It is. It is. Like the LSU kick, like, all right, look, for all we like want to dog on Herrera for not making that field goal, which I thought it looked good off the foot, but man, it just fell short. It was a good kick, just not long enough.
No, it just turned.
Yeah,
It was the Alabama one was
the Alabama one, and that's also that's a difficult spot for anyone to kick in. It was like 50 yards, left hash mark. I mean, look, South Carolina in all these games, especially the LSU one, people always forget it because everyone loves to complain about the refs and Herrera missing the field goal and stuff. They had a 17-point lead. They were up 17-0, and they did nothing more with it. So, look, as much as like we're talking about South Carolina needing to get a kicker and stuff, how about find a way to hold on to leads? And I think South Carolina did a good job of that as the year moved along. I mean, that LSU game was like something that just you can't have that happen this year, because if it does, that is going to be why you potentially don't make the playoff. Like, you can't be cruising along, dominating a team in the first half at home, and then let LSU get going in the second half. And you have some tough road games this year, and if you have a lead, you better not give it up, because home field advantage is a real thing in the SEC.
So also you had Lenore Sellers get injured in that game and basically missed the second half. He tried to go to the first series. But I do think South Carolina is in much better shape at backup quarterback. I think there's a different philosophy. I'm really interested to see, because there's been a lot of talk about Cutter Woods, and I really like him a lot. But the Gamecocks, getting a guy like Prentice Air Noland, it's like people just gloss over that. But Lenore Sellers is a dual threat quarterback. He did miss a quarter of the Kentucky game, half of the LSU game, and because he had to miss all the Akron game. Let's face it, early in the season, Dowell Loggins did not trust Robbie Ashford to come in and run the full package and throw the football. Not until desperate times came, and then you got that total bullshit offensive pass interference call. Sorry about that, YouTube. I don't think that's going to be the issue this year, because I think that guy's too good. You're going to have to play him some, and I think it will benefit Lenore Sellers and the offense as a whole to have another guy that you have the confidence in that can run your football team.
I almost wonder if I do think Air is going to see some time on the field this year, one way or another, because as we did see last year, with the amount Lenoris ran, I think we always knew like some hit might happen or something might happen, like it did in the LSU game when he got sacked and he had to miss the second half. Like, you hope that doesn't happen this year. You hope he's on the field for every snap. But I also think there's a world in which maybe there's a package for Air, right, that is specific to him and it just works, right? And you can bring him in the game. He's already redshirted, so, I mean, you only have 4 years with him at most, so might as well get what you can out of him. And let him get some time on the field. I think would be good. And I think there's going to be games this year where, especially early on in the season, when you're playing like SC State and maybe even Virginia Tech, that I think South Carolina is going to be ahead in those games to where all right, you can play your backups a bit. And that's where you get Air the experience he needs. And then, God forbid, Sellers ever gets hurt, Air is ready to go in those situations. And I am really excited to see what he can do. I think that was probably one of the more underrated additions because, yeah, you have Lenore Sellers, but don't take him for granted because, he might be gone after this year, going to the NFL draft, and he gets hurt or something. Who's your next best option? Air can be that guy, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does.
All right, so the last thing I want to get to today with you, and then we'll let you go. Torian Gray, the DB whisperer, he spoke yesterday. Obviously, Bakari Swain missing from the opening of spring practice. Do we know, is he going to be out for all of spring? And it's evidently not an injury-related issue. But who is the fifth guy? Like, there's a lot of talk about replacing Nick Emanwari and the hesitancy of moving Jalen Kilgore because he was so good at nickel last year. He had 5 interceptions. And so maybe you're looking for a safety back there with DQ Smith. Brandon Cisse is in the mix. You got Jaquel Hallman. Kendall Daniels Jr. is like a big safety. David Busey, Gerald Kilgore, and my guy from up in Rockwell, Peyton Williams at safety. I still think the best choice is Kilgore at free safety and Cisse or Jalewis Solomon or any, Miles Norwood. They got a lot of options at that nickel spot. I think Zabari Sandy's playing nickel. How do you see that shaking out? And talk to us about the Bakari Swain.
Yeah, and with Bakari, obviously he, hasn't been at spring practice. I mean, we were at the first spring practice with the media, open to the media, and he wasn't out there. And Gamecock Central did some reporting on it. Not me directly, but others on Gamecock Central kind of hinting at the fact that it's not an injury or anything. It's more so like an academic issue, it would seem. So we'll see. I don't know exactly what the timetable is with that. Since it's not injury, it's obviously something that is really it could happen at any time, right? Where you come back. We'll see. We'll be at practice tomorrow for the second media open practice session. So we'll see if he's out there then. But I will say with this, the secondary, it is interesting because I think Kilgore is what'd you say? You think he's going to be at nickel probably?
I mean, that's what they said. The hesitancy to move him back to free safety was because he was so good at nickel.
Yeah.
5 interceptions. I still think he's probably the most natural. I mean, maybe other than he may be the best athlete on the defense, honestly.
I think so. And Torian brought it up that, if you move, like you said, Keith, if you move him out of nickel, you kind of have to figure out, all right, who's going to be playing, that spot, right? Like, I'm sorry, if you move him to safety, who are you going to have playing nickel? And Jalen, I thought, did very, very well at nickel last year. And they like him at nickel. He likes to play nickel. Why make the change, right? And I think at DB specifically, some of the guys that I do want to see kind of like, I think DQ Smith's going to be out there at safety still, and then kind of figure out, who else do you want out there at safety? Because Nick Emanwari is a big void to fill. There's some guys that I definitely think can be in that mix. Like, what's David Busey going to do? Peyton Williams is a name that's very interesting to me because he did some really good things when South Carolina needed him to step up last year when guys got hurt or, like the Citrus Bowl when Nick Emanwari, didn't play the second half, and the Vanderbilt game. A lot of different situations where Peyton came in and did some really good things to where I think he could be a factor this year. And other than that, you're losing O'Donnell Fortune. Who else is going to be stepping up at DB? Brandon Cisse, the guy that probably sticks out as one dude to fill that void. And I want to see more from Judge Carter. I thought he was pretty good as a freshman. It was all right last year. He had some down moments, I think, last year. But I think going into his junior year now, I think Judge has really got to take the next step to be a guy that leads the DB room. And maybe he becomes Torian's next, I don't know what the right word, not project, but next, stud out there in the secondary. I think Judge is a guy that I think probably would start right now if the season were to begin today. And I really want to see what he can do to further himself in his development.
Torian Gray, in his press conference, mentioned that he has taken a huge leap, and I think he is that lockdown corner. I thought he had a great sophomore year. I mean, look, it's the SEC. Nobody's going to completely lock it down.
You're going to get burned at times.
But I thought he was, honestly, I think he and Bakari Swain are both better, particularly tacklers, than O'Donnell Fortune. He went to the Deion Sanders School of Tackling, unfortunately. But I want to see some of these young, like Jalewis Solomon. What does he do? I mean, DeMarcus Leach is a very interesting guy from Abbeville who could play corner or nickel. Kelvin Hunter, a four-star guy who played nickel. A lot of people, he reminds me of DJ Swearinger when I turn on his high school film. And I'm just saying, Kendall Daniels Jr., 6'4", 220, big-time guy, former teammate of Fred J.R. Johnson. I don't think it's automatic red shirt for that guy. South Carolina beat a lot of great programs for him, and by all accounts, he is a stud. I mean, there's just so many players and so many options. We didn't even mention Miles Norwood, who may be the second or third fastest guy on the football team after Nick Harbor and, well, we'll say on the defense, because Nick Harbor's 10-1 100 meters, Lex Cyrus is sub 10-4, and Malik Clark is 10-5. I mean, that's world-class speed at wide receiver. So I really think it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out, and when does Bakari Swain get out of the doghouse and does he rejoin the team in time for spring? Because he's got all the tools in the world, but he needs the consistency, and that only comes through getting better every single day in practice.
And he showed some – he's another guy that showed some very good things last year. I think back to the Kentucky game. Some of the hits he would lay on guys, coming off the edge a little bit. I like what he brings to the table in that secondary at DB. And I think with him and Judge, I think honestly, of all the positions on defense that I feel like you lost talent at from last year, I feel like DB, besides Eamon Wari, I feel like you're pretty much returning a lot of key guys, and OD Fortune, obviously. But I think you're returning a lot of talent that Jalen Kilgore is going to lead the way. You hope DQ Smith is better this year as a senior. You got some guys in that room, and I like what they brought in. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with the secondary, and you really could go a lot of ways, but you do definitely hope that Bakari is, coming back relatively soon here.
I mean, you mentioned his physicality. I think he could play nickel, and you could play Cisse.
I think so, yeah.
All right, so last thing. Men's basketball, massive turnover on the roster because BBV, after his 37th year in college, he's finally going straight to the Supreme Court, I think, as a judge. Jacoby Wright, Jamari Thomas, they're out of eligibility. Nick Pringle, Zachary Davis, Arden Conyers, Austin Hero, all in the portal. CMB, probably a lottery pick. He's probably gone. How does Lamont Paris and his staff rebuild the roster? What are you hearing early on some of the names? And so let's go there, and then I'm going to ask you the next question, which I think is really the biggest question. But what are you hearing early in the transfer portal?
Well, they're going after a lot of guys, obviously. They are in on a lot of different names, and, some of the latest ones, obviously we have it posted on Gamecock Central, is, Gavin Walsh from Binghamton. You have Corey Chest from LSU, a 6'8" forward as a freshman last year. And they're going after a lot of different guys, and I think that is what we're seeing here is I give Lamont a lot of credit in the fact of, I think obviously everyone knows a 2-16.
All right, so I got to ask you to back up, Jack, because you kind of froze.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
So can you start from the beginning?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Froze up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, all good. Sweet.
Yeah.
So like as I was saying, South Carolina's in on a lot of guys right now. Some of the latest ones. You can go to GamecockCentral.com for those of you guys listening to check it out more in depth. But they're going after guys like Gavin Walsh from Binghamton, Corey Chest from LSU most recently too. There's a lot of names that, all right from Valparaiso, Donovan Atwell from UNC Greensboro, a lot of different names, Jakari White. I mean, they are in on a lot of – Bryce Lindsey's another guy that, obviously had South Carolina interest, in previous years. There's a lot of guys they're going after, and they're in the mix on a lot of different players right now. And I think that's a good thing because you look at last year, this past season, 2-16 in the SEC, last place finish, only winning 12 games. You are not bringing back the same roster as last year going into the 2025-26 season. No chance you are ever doing that. And that's what we're seeing. I think Lamont Paris and South Carolina are okay with letting guys go. We saw that with Zach Davis. We see that with Arden Conyers. We're seeing that with some other guys, obviously, on this team, like Nick Pringle, too. I'm not going to be surprised when we see a fully different roster pretty much going into next year. You'll have some guys back, I would imagine, with, Oku Federico. What's he going to look like next year? Guys like that. Do you get Miles Studi back with him applying for the medical hardship waiver? It's going to be a very different roster, though, next year, and I am going to be interested to see ultimately, because they're in on a lot of guys right now, but that's just being in on guys. Are they going to be able to get who they want, number one? And the other big question I don't think gets brought up enough, are they going to be willing to spend the capital necessary in NIL to go out and build a coherently good roster? Because they missed on some guys last year, and for one reason or another, money always is in these reasonings for why guys are choosing schools and stuff. Can South Carolina invest more money into a good basketball program? Because, man, it was only a year and a half. It was only a year ago, calendar-wise, that South Carolina was, coming off a 26-win season and really had a lot of momentum, and they squandered it. So you hope they can kind of get back to being a competitive basketball team again.
So, look, I agree. Money is a big factor. But last year, they only asked for $1.5 million. Okay. And so my question is, and there were a couple guys that they could have gotten that just wanted a little bit more money, that the guy that's supposed to ask for the money, I'm not mentioning names here, Kerry Rich, didn't ask for money. And so my question is, the SEC is shark-infested waters, okay? Auburn, Alabama, Kentucky, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, the list goes on. Okay, those teams spent over twice as much, all of them, as South Carolina did. Jeremiah Donati's going to get the money. My question is, you brought your entire staff from UT Chattanooga, and you hired Kerry Rich, who I think was good because he knew the local high school coaches. He had connections to players. But he's made all those introductions now. If Lamont Paris doesn't know everybody, that's on him. Does Lamont Paris have the staff? Because I don't think there's any sharks on this coaching staff. And I love Will Bailey. I'll vouch for him. He coached my daughter's godfather, who played for me for a year at the University of Maine. But you can't have minnows or sea bass swimming in shark-infested waters and where they smell blood. I mean, does Lamont Paris have the staff to be able to turn it around?
I think he does. Again, it's no accident what happened in that second year that South Carolina went from a god-awful 11-win team in his first year to winning 26 games in year two and getting to the NCAA tournament. And a lot of that happens with the coaches that you have on staff. Tanner Bronson's been with him for what feels like forever now, as he's basically right-hand guy. And I think they do have the coaches to get this thing right. The one thing I will say, and again, I'm just remembering off the top of the head here, kind of paraphrasing, I remember there were times where LP kind of talked about things just wouldn't translate to, they would the coaches would tell these players stuff in practice and all that, but it just wouldn't translate to the floor for whatever reason. It was like some things would be said and then it'd go out the other ear. That's basically what I took out of what LP had to say at times last year. And so I don't know if it's so much of a coach thing or a staff thing. I think at the end of the day, they're doing the best job they can. It's just, the players also deserve a little bit of criticism for what happened this season. It was CMB and then everyone else. And, for as much as South Carolina struggled, I mean, they had opportunities to win games, but it's there was always something. It was either a careless pass. I can't tell you how many times I saw the ball fly into the stands. I mean, it happened at a record pace this season. I also can't tell you how many times I remember seeing wide open shots go in and out of the rim. That is not necessarily on coaching. That is more so just a guy missing shots. And we saw that progressively throughout the year. And I think we're starting to see those guys get fizzled out. Zach Davis, for some good moments he had at South Carolina, I think he took a step back defensively this year a little bit. And then also, for as much as the discussion going into the year was that his shot was better and stuff, he was going to be a much better shooter. He might have averaged more points, but consistently speaking, I didn't see a guy that made shots that he should be making. He missed so many shots last year that it's just I can understand why you're letting guys like that go. So to kind of answer the question a little bit, no, I don't think it's necessary. Everyone has a hand in it, obviously, when you win 12 games, but it's not solely on the coaching staff or anything. I don't really agree with that, in my opinion.
All right, so Cam Scott, is he back or not? What do you think?
I think he's going to be coming back. I mean, we haven't heard anything right now on whether he's what's his plan right now. Obviously, something I feel would have come out by now if that were the case. Because again, they've already had these meetings and stuff. I do feel like there's still some potential there to get this thing going. My thing is, you don't invest the capital and the effort you put into flipping him from Texas to South Carolina just to let him walk and go play at another school. After 1 year where he barely played, no, I don't think that is how you should be going about it here. Get him another year here at South Carolina. I think play him more is number one. I've always said it. Add some more muscle, add a little bit more to his frame because he's a lanky guy. I mean, he's very I don't want to say, like, he's very like Kevin Durant in terms of like not talent, obviously. Kevin Durant's one of one, but like in terms of like not being like super like strong or anything. I think that's the one thing he's missing as an SEC guard is that, you know, he's got some height to him. He's got a decent shot. You got to get more minutes. I think he's got to get in the weight room a little bit more too. So I liked what I saw from him in his action in the SEC tournament for that one game. Played some good minutes in the second half. Kind of gave South Carolina a spark to nearly make the comeback against Arkansas in that first round game. But I want to see more of that. And I think there's a lot left that Cam has to do to reach his full potential. And I think he could definitely do it with some, you know, a good summer here. That's going to be huge for him. And then, you know, if he ultimately does come back to South Carolina, I think he should. I think there's a chance he could be a nice, you know, factor for this team going into 2025.
Yeah, I mean, Jacoby Wright and Jamari Thomas were not even a middle-of-the-road Southern Conference backcourt. I mean, to me, college basketball is about guard play. Lamont Paris, he missed it on Cam Scott because he said, hey, this guy's going to be freshman of the year. If he's not, you know, I think he made some comment about he'd give up his salary if he's not on the team. Clearly that didn't happen. There was a disconnect there defensively. I think he's got to get better there. But South Carolina, I thought, got very fortunate in that B.J. Mack was from Charlotte and Talon Cooper was a Dorman High School, South Carolina guy who may have been, other than Dalton Connect, one of the top portal hits in the country. What he meant to that team, the way he hit big shots in that for that team and made big plays that were game-winning plays. They've got to make major upgrades in the backcourt, and they've got to get somebody with some power to replace Colin Murray-Boyles.
Absolutely, because I do think, you know, he hasn't made a public decision yet, but I'd be hard to believe that CMB would come back, right? Like, he's got so much draft stock right now. I think he's definitely a first-round pick, potentially lottery pick. That's too good to pass up. So I think he's going to go league-bound and have a good career and whatnot. And you got to replace him, and that's really hard to do. And you're also replacing Nick Pringle, too. You're basically going to be replacing your starting front court and then pretty much your entire starting five, to be honest, really. I mean, you're losing Jacoby, you're losing Jamari, and you're losing Zach. I mean, you're going to have a new starting five pretty much next year. And we'll see what happens with Studi, of course. I think he'd be a guy that would start next year if he comes back with the medical waiver and all that stuff. But that's a whole other thing. I do think, though, got to get a sharpshooter out there. And I think also the one thing they were missing outside of a guy that could go score besides CMB, you mentioned Talon Cooper. I do think they were missing that consistent floor general. That's such an underrated factor.
Yeah, bigger, more physical guy too.
Yeah, like Cooper, he almost averaged 10 points a game in his 1 year at South Carolina. I think it was like 9.9 points. He was never going. He wasn't the guy that was going to go drop 30 points a game. That wasn't him. But he's a guy that can hit his threes. He's going to average about, a few threes a game and some big shots, and then he's going to drive to the lane and make some shots. He's also going to play good defense and be the guy that South Carolina needs as a true point guard. I just feel like they didn't have that this year because Jamari was much more of a scorer, even though at times he didn't do a lot of scoring. I just think you need to get back to that, and then you can go out there and you're also bringing in Eli Ellis and guys like that, Grant Polk, EJ Walker, Hayden Simeon. Like, you're bringing in some freshmen that I think can make an impact next year. If Cam Scott is back too, what does that mean for your guard play and stuff? You have a lot of things to figure out, but I mean, there's so much work to do to get this roster right. And that is why ultimately I am glad that South Carolina declined the NIT bid. They got to focus on the future and not so much on a meaningless tournament that has no impact on your future.
Yeah, the message board mafia or mob that went after Jeremiah Donati and Paris for turning down. Look, you lost 20 games. Okay. A 20-loss team should not be in the NIT. They should be retooling their roster and mining and back channeling before the portal opened. Hopefully that's what they've done. Hopefully they got enough money to get it done. I want to see Lamont Paris flourish at South Carolina, but this is Jeremiah Donati did not hire him. He also did not give him a huge extension after last year, but he also didn't expect him to lose 20 games this year. And next year is going to be critical. It's a pivotal year. I think South Carolina at least has to accept an NIT bid with a winning record next year to start climbing back out of the cellar of the SEC.
No, most definitely. I agree with you.
All right, Jack, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for being so generous with your time, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road and not keep you as long. So,
thanks, Keith.
Thanks for hanging in.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks as always. Happy to be on.
All right, brother. All right, that was Jack Veltri, and that will do it for me tonight for our VIP patrons, the Garnet and Black Town Hall, which is an interactive Zoom call. You can go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Gamecock Pod Daily. And you can sign up for a 7-day trial membership, and you can join us on the Garnet and Black Town Hall Wednesdays during baseball season, Tuesday, the rest of the year. So for Lulu Kesin and Jack Veltri, Keith Alsep saying God bless and go Gamecocks. I'm out of here.